Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
It's a pleasure. It's a true honor to be here with both of you guys here today.
And for the second to last time, the penultimate time, Jordan.
I guess you could call me the penultimate Jordan. There's only one better.
Yeah, sorry we took a week off. We had some complications with the scheduling of the podcast and stuff, but glad to be back. Anywho, let's hop right into this. We got quite a bit of news. Obviously, there's a big Xbox Series X stuff we'll get into as the topic of the show, but there's some smaller bits of news I wanted to get to. First up, I know it's your second to last episode, Jordan, but we had to get one more little jab in there at you, one little more heartbreak for you. Sanzaru Games has been acquired by Facebook. And I wrote here, virtually killing Jordan's dreams of a Sly Cooper 5 from the developer.
Yep, indeed. And I'll tell you, Jared, they were that last beacon, as I mentioned in our chat. They were that last beacon that was the champion of the Sly franchise, you could say. They had the opportunity to do Sly 4 after they championed the HD collection of the original game. So, sad to see them go away from Sony, but I wish them the best of luck. They're a cool studio.
It's real interesting now at the turn of the generation. Sony's losing quite a bit of their... Obviously, they acquired Insomniac, but they've lost, in the last couple of years, a number of their third-party close partners, right? Quantic Dream has now become an independent publisher.
Yeah, I would consider them... I would say they're losing a lot of second-party.
Yeah,
like
sorry,
Quantic Dream, Sanzaru is more... I know these terms are loose, just kind of like when we talk about AAA, AA, but I would consider Sanzaru and Quantic Dream, or even like the closure of the Sleeping Dog Studio, or
the Until Dawn developer. What's their name?
Supermassive, and then I'm thinking of
Ready at Dawn. Even
Ready at Dawn. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So quite a number of them. Obviously, I'm not trying to spell doom and gloom for PlayStation. It's just weird because normally with, a console like PlayStation 5 that's selling gangbusters, right, you would assume that those partnerships would extend moving forward, but just, maybe by bad luck or weird timing, all of these second-party studios are kind of dissipating in front of them. It's very weird.
I think United Front Games was Sleeping Dogs, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Next up, a Borderlands movie is now in development by Lionsgate. It's going to be directed by Eli Roth. If you're not familiar with him, he's most notably in Inglourious Bastards, and he directed the Hostel franchise.
Plays a bear Jew.
Yeah, exactly. And it's written by the scribe of, and this runs the gamut of quality, right? The guy who's writing this, I didn't put down his name, my fault. He was a lead writer on Chernobyl, right? Fantastic, great miniseries. Hangover 2 and 3, depending on who you ask. Okay. Big hits or misses. And Scary Movie 3. So, quite a wide range there. You don't know in terms of quality where it's going to lie with the writing. But some goods there, some bads. Eli Roth is an interesting choice for director because Borderlands needs to have that grit and that violence to it. But his biggest... the biggest complaint towards this film is that they can be a little bit too much of gore porn, right? So it's going to be interesting to see where this movie lands. I'm assuming it won't come in at anything less than a PG-13 rating if it ever gets made. Once again, these video game movies stay in flux. According to Tom Holland recently, this is just something I'm adding in, he had an interview on the red carpet for the premiere of Onward, the new Pixar film, and he said they're going to start filming the Uncharted movie in a month, which is odd considering there's not a director currently attached to the project because the most recent director... fell out of it, as a lot of them have. So
they just told Tom Holland, "Don't worry, bud. We're starting in a month. It's real soon."
The crazy thing with him too is he recently revealed that he was approached for a Back to the Future remake as well.
Wow.
Which is weird, because there's a whole situation with the rights of that movie and everything. Anyways, the last bit of news here is some. I don't know if it's not positive news directly towards Jordan, but it is a developer he really loves. CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red has recently become the second largest video game company behind Ubisoft in the United Kingdom based on market valuation. So Ubisoft is currently valued at 9.6 billion, and recently CD Projekt Red's valuation shot up to 8 billion, which is pretty impressive.
Christ.
Yeah.
Even though that's not like, you know, that's valuation. That's a little bit different than actually having that much money, but
yeah.
I mean, you got to be doing something right to get there, you know.
You have to imagine though with them that because they're based in Poland, the proportionate value of that company to the country is probably insane. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, dude! Like, if they're worth that much in the UK, then they have to be one of the, you know, most successful companies in their own country for sure.
Yeah. Period. Regardless of video game, right? As a sub.
Dom,
category.
what are some of the other famous Polish companies that everyone knows?
You have Jed's sausages.
Jedediah.
You have Karen's Root Beer Co.
These are Polish people?
Yeah. Well, Karen herself is not Polish, but the company is owned by Marcus Peterus. I'm making
Marcus
so much
with a
shit up off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's a really cool. Like you said, valuation isn't exactly the amount of money they're bringing in, right? But it shows that they do hold value in the United Kingdom, period. And to be behind, you look at Ubisoft, right? Who's like a mega publisher with developers all around the world. And you look at CD Projekt Red, this company who's made 3 outstanding Witcher games, some spin-off titles, and what?
One great Witcher game and one, you know, masterpiece Witcher game, and then another Witcher game.
You think one isn't that good?
I think that really they've made Gwent and then they've made 3 big games, right, in their main series, and I think that if you look at Witcher 1 being a mod from another game that they turned into
Did
this
not know
game
that.
of their own, and now you look at this news that you're reporting now, Jared, it's just, that's a gigantic jump in the span of definitely less than 20 years. I can't remember when Witcher 1 came out.
I think like 2008. I want to say 2008.
The original Witcher, I think it was before that, but
Before that?
nonetheless, I think they've done, you know, most of this gigantic growth within the last 20 years for sure.
It's tough because it came out on PC and then it didn't get ported to consoles for a while. So maybe I'm thinking of a date closer to the console port.
The original Witcher never actually came to consoles. It was supposed to.
I guess I'm thinking of
come to
Witcher 2 then.
360, but never happened.
Yeah.
So let's see, release
Witcher 2
2007.
Only to Xbox 360.
2007. Okay, so I was
2007,
close.
Jared, you were on point. So, I mean that makes it even crazier feat because it's less than 15 years that they've had this exponential growth. And I mean, The Witcher 1 is a rough fucking game. So for them to come so far in such a short amount of time is something special for sure.
Dom, when I said 3, I was actually talking about 2, Witcher 3, and Cyberpunk. Changing my answer.
There you go. Nice.
I do think obviously this upgrade in valuation is due to the Witcher 3 sales after the Witcher Netflix series released, right? The huge spike. On top of the fact that I think a lot of these shareholders are drawing relations between GTA 5 success and what Cyberpunk could possibly do in that same field. Obviously they're not one-to-one games, but a lot of the same feeling, open world, you know, future and modern games. So it's going to be interesting to see where their valuation goes in the coming years. We assume Cyberpunk's going to sell like gangbusters, so.
They do have 2 successful franchises, but I think it's going to be important, like this stuff that we're talking about, their value, it's going to be really important to see what they do with a possible original IP after Cyberpunk, if they do that. Because they don't own Cyberpunk or Witcher. Those are technically both adaptations, so.
And we're also not factoring in the multiplayer for Cyberpunk, which will come at a later date on next gen. And depending on how successful that is with monetization, that could blow up as well. You know what I mean? Bring them in a ton
I'm
of
trying
revenue.
to figure out if I would rather have an original IP from CD Projekt or a Witcher 4 after Cyberpunk, and it's a tough decision, man. It's clearly mine to make, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong answer either. I think there's just a great and greater answer.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it
mean,
also
they're getting to the point where they could probably do both. You know.
That
I
too.
think
Yeah.
their direction might hinge on how successful the Netflix series is. As weird as that sounds, obviously they don't get any profit off of that. But if the Netflix series continues and Siri becomes like a really prominent pop culture figure, it might be in their best interest to focus on a Witcher 4, right?
Good
With
point.
maybe her as
Now,
a
they
lead pro
don't-
tag.
I don't think that they're making anything off the success of the Netflix show. You know,
Not
because
directly, but
that's
yeah.
not their show, so it'll. They're clearly profiting off of it. You know. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, since that's not necessarily their deal.
Yeah, because the thing there is, if Siri does become this pop culture figure, then they have to do a lot of the behind the scenes market research to figure out if, having her as a lead pro tag in their next game could lead to like crazy sales success. And is that worth it, or should they go for an original IP? Who knows?
They're gonna have to make their character model like similar to the show version, because you know how people bitched about the Avengers not looking like MCU version.
Oh god, yeah. By that time, they're gonna re-release Witcher 3 on next gen consoles, and it's gonna have Geralt looking like Henry Cavill. They're gonna just overlay an update.
I mean,
That'd
he
be so
wears
funny.
some of the Geralt's video game suits, so
Yeah. Let's hop into this Xbox Series X stuff. This is quite a bit to go through. I broke it down as easily as I thought it could be digested, so we'll work through this. This was in a blog post by Phil Spencer, who posted this in the early morning hours on Monday, February 24th, I think at 6 a.m. Pacific time. And he unveiled plenty of unknown details and revealed new features for the next-gen console. So we'll go through this in steps. The first one is the specs. So he stated that the custom-designed processor will support AMD Zen 2 and RDNA 2 architectures, which is important because both of these are yet to be available in the PC space. Without going into too much of the nitty-gritty, thanks to Digital Foundry for breaking some of this stuff down for me who's not super into the PC tech space side. What people were assuming was going to happen was they were going to put some of the features that the RDNA 2 architecture allows the processor to be capable of. They were going to put that and overlace it on the currently existing RDNA 1, right? Because that's what seemed most advantageous, considering it isn't available currently on PC. So people didn't even know that RDNA 2 existed, right? That's what the idea was. They were going to overlay some of these new features, but instead it was announced that it was RDNA 2, which is a whole new thing. So the speculation is that the PS5 will also include the AMD Zen 2 technology. It's just unclear if it'll do RDNA 2 or if it'll do RDNA 1, if that's like a partnership directly with Microsoft.
gotcha.
Yeah. Next, 12 teraflops of GPU performance, which is, you'd look at it and be like, oh, it's numerically twice that of the Xbox One X, and you'd assume, oh, it's twice the power. But also, according to Digital Foundry, once again, the way teraflops work, it isn't directly, it's hard to compute what the exact power is of a teraflop unit, right? But according to Digital Foundry, twice of the Xbox One X's 6 teraflops would actually be 10 teraflops, not 12. So the Xbox Series X will be more than double that of the Xbox One X.
Yeah, not only that, and then like there's other measures that's
Exactly.
like probably the best measure for just a GPU. And yeah, I'm also getting into that territory where I'm going to say some ignorant shit because I don't totally understand it. But
Yeah.
there's other measures of how powerful a GPU is. Then there's also like the CPU side of things too. Even though it's one chip, that's like the CPU power is also important if you're talking about the console overall.
The reason teraflops is
12
being
is a
used
lot.
is because it's an easy market term to sell to consumers. It's a number you can pitch as a marketing ploy. Yeah.
As goofy as people like to make it sound, like with it being kind of a meme type of joke, they obviously remember the term teraflop.
Exactly. Yeah.
It means something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep that in mind because there's something we're going to get to later about how twice the numerical value doesn't necessarily mean twice the power. It's actually more than that. Keep that in mind for later on in these details. So next up, variable rate shading, which is VRS. So this efficiently uses the GPU cycles to target specific characters and effects and ignore irrelevant pixels, equating to more stable frame rates and higher resolution. So basically, what this allows developers to do is go in and, depending on the current scene or actions taking place in the game, they can stabilize and focus on the pixels and assets in the screen that need the focus, and they can remove the GPU processing from stuff that's less relevant. So, like, say you're walking through a city and there's a barrel that isn't really in direct line sight, they can remove a lot of that processing power to stabilize frame rate and visual fidelity and focus on the things that are actually, like, take more focus. So it's just basically more developer tools to stabilize frame rate and higher resolution. The easiest way to communicate that. Next up, DirectX ray tracing. Ray tracing is something we've talked about numerous times on the podcast. Most people think it just helps with lighting. That's not actually true. It also helps with reflections, and it helps with acoustics in games, which is something that's not really brought up with ray tracing. Mostly people think of it as a visual enhancer, right, to lighting and reflections, but it also helps with acoustics in games. Dope stuff. DirectX.
I'm honestly really excited about where we could go from an audio perspective with this next generation, because I kind of what the point you're making there, Jared. It's like there's just so many things that aren't necessarily market buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, they could really push us into untold territories as far as being next gen, being a futuristic gaming experience that we are not currently having. And I would really like to see where we can go with that.
And the crazy thing with this too is one of the studios best known for their audio development techniques is Ninja Theory, right? With Hellblade. Yeah. So I'm really intrigued to see how much they take advantage of this stuff with the DirectX ray tracing and other, acoustic based tools.
It's so cool thinking about, like, you hear a new feature popping up in one of these kind of console reveals or whatever, and you're like, oh, I wonder how this studio would use that.
Exactly.
They could do something really cool with that feature.
So that's all the spec stuff, right? Honestly, it's important stuff, but to the average everyday consumer, they pretty much look at the teraflop number and then move on. They don't really care too much about that stuff. Next up is the features. So it'll feature SSD storage, which is something we assumed it would, but it's good to have confirmation. Next up, dynamic latency input, so otherwise known as DLI. So this basically synchronizes the input immediately, resulting in more precise and responsive controls between the hardware and the accessory controllers. So that's good.
And that's something that I was talking about with Sekiro, where it's like, I just feel this game requires a precise input, and it was the first time, fighting game fans and people of certain niche genres have talked about this forever, of like, oh, I got to have a wired controller because I can't have input lag. Yeah. And it's a big thing on PC as well, right? So this was the first time for me where I experienced a situation that could have actually hindered my play or my enjoyment, because I was like, man, I've obviously had plenty of connection issues with the Switch, but maybe even PS4 and Xbox One could use an upgrade in that department.
And using this dynamic latency input can help offset stuff with streaming, right? Maybe make it a little bit more crisp if you lose out on some of that latency through streaming.
Obviously the biggest issue with game streaming right now, so yeah.
Next up, we have HDMI 2.1. This is kind of a future-proofing thing. HDMI 2.1 is being currently put into televisions. It's kind of the future of HDMI. So this is them future-proofing the console to be able to work. It's kind of like, not directly. This is a weird comparison, but kind of like a HD, like 1080p, right? When people got the 1080p consoles, but a lot of people still had the TVs that didn't really output 1080p, right? It's kind of the same thing. They're just
HDMI
future-proofing.
Like firmware upgrades are essentially about the amount of data flow, because like older versions of HDMI can't do HDR, not because they don't have like the HDR plug-in or whatever, but it's because their bandwidth is smaller and they're not, I think it's like 18 gigabytes per second or higher. And so this is just widening that bandwidth, I'm sure, and there's probably other super intricate features that I'm not aware of. But yeah.
Yeah, this type of thing is something that people won't notice, but assume that PS5 will also have this. It's just a way of future-proofing their consoles. And, assumptions are assumptions. Take that as you will, but it'd be hard to think that the PS5
There's a
won't have it.
standard that they're going to have to meet, though, moving into this next generation. Like we were talking about with hard drives, it'd be fucked up if we're getting 500 gigabyte hard drives on this game.
God, yeah. Next up, it'll have up to 120 FPS support. Obviously, just because something supports that doesn't mean every game's going to have 120 frames per second. Guarantee that majority of games won't have that, but it will be capable of that, which is cool. Next up, this is a feature I'm really excited about. So currently on PS4 and Xbox One, we have the resume feature where you can suspend a game, do some other stuff, and then come back to the game without worrying about it loading again, right? Well, the Xbox Series X will have that for multiple games. So you'll be able to suspend multiple games at a time and come back to them, which is helpful for people who enjoy single-player and multiplayer games, or even different types of multiplayer games or single-player games, and you can jump back between them, right, and not have to worry about loading. For instance, for me, the scenarios I thought about are, say I'm playing Cyberpunk, right, and my friends hop on and they want to play some Avengers. I don't have to worry about having to load Cyberpunk again, right? I can suspend that, hop into Avengers, be playing that, and then hop back to Cyberpunk when I'm done. Or, say I'm playing Cyberpunk, but I'm achievement hunting in a different game. If I get tired of Cyberpunk and want to shift, I can go back and forth between the two and not have to worry about loading. So it's really helpful.
The other thing is, if you suspend an application now, basically the only option you have is like to put, like for PS4 as an example, the only option you have is just to put your console into rest mode and come back to it later. It's not like you can hop to another application.
Yeah.
Even if it's only just one other application, you can't even do that. So this multitasking, like you said, if you're achievement hunting and you want to hop over to YouTube real quick, watch a little video, it'd be great if you could have a picture-in-picture situation, though that's probably not possible, but nonetheless being able to hop back and forth almost like jumping between applications on a phone, on a smartphone, that would be great.
Yeah, or if you're in the mood to play... Sorry, Dom, go ahead.
No, yeah, that's pretty cool, because I want to say, like, I could be wrong, but I think on PS4, you hit pause. I don't even think you can then open, like, the PSN store.
Yeah.
I think, like, you have to close your game first.
You couldn't even do, like, a game and YouTube, much less two games.
Right. You can hit, like, some of the other, like, settings and most of the other stuff in there, but, yeah, you can't, like, have two different things open simultaneously. But this is like this is really cool, and I'm excited to hear it, because this boy must just be packed with RAM to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
If it's really holding it, or maybe they're doing it a different way, like it's more like a save state. I don't know, but it's really fascinating. That's
so is
sweet.
This going to fall in line with what we saw on PS4's most recent Wired article, where they're talking about instead of like jumping into a game, going to the main title screen, loading up your save, and then starting, you can just like jump straight into your save?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one-to-one necessarily, but that'll be interesting too. What if the PS5 has that feature, but it doesn't necessarily have... I guess it would technically be multiple games in suspension, because then how would you get to it quickly? Yeah, right. It's just... I want to see PS5 reveal a lot of stuff so we can compare and contrast and see how they're handling these different things. But for me, this is huge. This is one of the coolest features, I think, for the next console, because sometimes you feel like playing different genres of games too, and you want to hop back and forth between them, right? Like, I want to play an RTS, but then I want to go to an FPS, and just not having to worry about loading screens and everything, man. It's going to cut out. On top of the fact that we already know that loading times in general are going to be cut down, right? So that's awesome. That's pretty much it for the features section. Now we're going to get to the compatibility for the next-gen console. First up, this is something we already knew, but once again, confirmation. Xbox Game Pass will still release first-party exclusives at launch into the service. Phil just wanted to make sure people knew that was still going to be happening. So obviously, day one, Halo Infinite is going to be available for you if you have Game Pass and you purchase... Well, you don't even have to purchase an Xbox Series X, because it'll be available on current-gen consoles.
Real quick, could you remind me, how did we receive this information?
Phil Spencer posted it on Xbox via a blog post himself.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So not too dissimilar from what Sony has done with Wired.
Yeah, the thing I will say, though, is I do think it feels a little bit more personal because it was on their site by the person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's clearly him being like, all right, hey guys, I want to get this like nerdy shit out of the way. I know you're interested in it. Here it is. And then they'll talk about the flashy shit on stage sometime.
The timing is interesting too, because think about this. PAX is happening this weekend, the week we're recording this, and PlayStation was supposed to be there initially with Last of Us 2, right? Obviously they pulled out, and this happened on Monday. So it's interesting if this was the plan all along, and they were planning to get this news out ahead to kind of, get in front of the Last of Us 2, consumer impressions, or if once they saw PlayStation pulled out, they were maybe planning on doing this a little bit later, but they're like, okay, we have an open window now. We have this week to ourselves. The timing on that is real interesting considering, PAX East was this weekend. So that's all the features. Let's talk about compatibility outside of the Xbox Game Pass stuff. The other one is not only will your entire library of games from Xbox, Xbox 360, and Xbox One be available day one, which is something we all assumed, but it's going to be confirmed. They'll benefit from faster load times, steadier frame rates, and improved resolution and visual fidelity. No developer work needed. So this is something that games benefited from in the Xbox One X, right? And it seems like they're extending that to their next-gen console. They already have this back-end system that does this automatically, so it's going to be interesting to see how much more these games are improved. Once again, though, it's really dope that your entire library will be available day one because that's added value at launch. The crazy thing is, if you're already a Game Pass subscriber, all you really have to do is buy the console, and you'll have access to Halo Infinite, whatever other first-party games are coming out at launch, and then your entire library you currently own. You know what I mean? And that's without knowing anything else in terms of launch titles. So that's pretty cool.
The thing is, regardless of whether we have more generations of home video game consoles or not, it's clear that we're never going to be walking into a generation again where we have to worry about being bored on our new console, not having enough games to play.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have your save file that you were just working on PS4 now that you're on PS5.
Yeah. It's great. It's awesome to be able to have access to that stuff because you don't want to feel like you wasted money on all of these games you're never going to get to. You still have access to them, right? Whether it's a burden or...
I'm sure we've all had that thing where we get a new console and there's only a few games out for it, or you only have a few games, and you play a little bit and you have a great time or whatever, however long you play, and then you're like, all right, well, I'm going to go back to my PS3 now because there's not enough out yet for PS4, and I was already really enjoying whatever on PS3, so that's not going to be a problem anymore.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about unplugging your current gen console and putting it in a box because you have access to all of those games and stuff, And for Xbox,
it makes me wonder what to do with my PS4 Pro, though. I'll say that. I'm like, do I need this thing? Is it... I mean, it's a digital console at this point, so it's not like having a PS1 or an N64 laying around,
Yeah. And for PS5, can you insert... have they said you can insert a PS4 disc into it?
No.
I don't know if they've been that explicit.
Yeah, they weren't explicit, but they did say it's backwards compatible, so I think it's safe to assume.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you wouldn't be able. They did say it has a Blu-ray drive, so it's like...
they're already on Blu-ray. I really honestly cannot imagine a reason why they would have PS4 compatibility, backwards compatibility, but only digitally. That doesn't make sense.
If it were the case, it would be arbitrary, right? Where they were intentionally locking that out so that people couldn't, buy used games or whatever, and hopefully that's not what they do.
Yeah, don't hold your breath on being able to insert a PS1, 2, or 3 disc, though.
Right,
I mean,
definitely
the
wouldn't
thing
expect
is,
that.
people talk about that, and it's like, those are CDs and DVDs that you just mentioned. Or a PS3 disc is a Blu-ray. Like, Sony, the newest, Sony hardware can clearly handle a compact disc or a digital video disc from 2002. It's like, if they can't read that shit, I don't know how, because Microsoft can.
Yep.
Microsoft Xbox One can read a DVD and 360 was on DVD as well, so it's like, why not?
There's weird things, man, that like even digitally you can't play. Like, why can't you buy PS1 and PS2 games on a PS4?
Oh god,
why?
They've really got to quit. Biggest hope for PlayStation with this next generation is quit making excuses, because it's ridiculous that you can't play some obscure PS1 game on your PS4 that you still have to pay, $100 on eBay and then buy a PS1 to play it just because they just make excuses for this stupid shit. Changing your names, the list goes on, whatever.
Man,
That's the thing
it's-
that sucks is
Excuses.
PlayStation's biggest leverage against Xbox's legacy, right? That's a Nintendo's big leverage on both of them too, and they're
Right.
not even taking advantage of it. It's like you're,
Right.
Yeah, they only
Well-
stand to make more money doing it. So it's like,
yeah.
As
figure it
Jim
out,
Ryan
guys?
has said, nobody wants to play those old PS2 games. I mean, why
Old
would
games
you,
are old.
you know?
Yeah. Next up, all your Xbox One X, not Xbox One X, all your Xbox One accessories will work on the Xbox Series X, which is huge,
Yeah.
especially for people who recently purchased the new Elite 2 controller. I'm on the cusp of possibly trying to buy one before the next gen console, since I know it's going to work with it, because God, that controller is so beautiful. I've held one and used one. It's a big investment. Next up, this is something that got quite a bit of traction when they talked about this: smart delivery. So, smart delivery is an initiative where you can buy any Xbox published game once and get access to the best version of the game on whatever console you're playing on. This means you'll only ever have to buy the game once, and it'll work on any of the Xbox family of consoles. So basically, if you buy Halo Infinite on Xbox One, if you decide to upgrade and get an Xbox Series X, you'll have access to the best version of that game on the Xbox Series
4K,
X.
60 FPS, HDR.
Exactly. You don't have to buy that game again.
Well,
and
also, I think this might retroactively fix another problem we've discussed, which is having, like, Jared, you have a PS4 Slim, right?
yes.
And as far as we can tell, when you download a game, you're downloading the 4K PS4 Pro version. You just play it at 1080 or whatever, and as far as we understand, that's the way it is on Xbox as well, because they don't have this smart delivery, which that aspect that I just mentioned, I think should have been standard from the get-go. It's ridiculous that you're clogging up your console with 4K textures that you're not going to use or whatever it may be. So hopefully that'll retroactively fix that as well.
The thing I love about this the most is, like, the smart delivery is something I was expecting from Xbox because they've been so consumer friendly. The next part, the big dick swing, is what I'm happy about, in which they stated it'll be an opt-in feature for third-party publishers and developers. So they basically laid down the gauntlet and said, hey, all those other people are putting games on the platform. They don't have to charge you either, but it's up to them. And speaking of which, to this, immediately, because you have to remember Cyberpunk 2077 is partnered with Microsoft in terms of marketing, CD Projekt Red quote tweeted the Xbox's link to Phil Spencer's blog post, and they stated, gamers should never be forced to purchase the same game twice or pay for upgrades. Owners of Cyberpunk 2077 for Xbox One will receive the Xbox Series X upgrade for free when available. That's awesome. This is huge for me because I was actually debating whether or not to wait. We had this discussion. I think maybe it was all three of us, or me and you, Dom, of do we wait? Do you play it right away? Now it's a no-brainer for me. I can pick up Cyberpunk 2077 at launch, play it on my Xbox One, and then the moment it becomes available on Series X, I can just download the version of that, right? The upgrade. So it's really cool.
Which we should be able to do on PS4 to PS5 as well. However, I'm not certain that I'll be getting the PS5 4K 60 HDR version. I might still be playing my PS4 Pro version on my PS5. Who knows?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would guarantee it because it's coming from CD Projekt, right? So like, they just said it that you shouldn't have to pay for upgrades. So
And there is
I mean,
very
they said
specific
it for
case.
the Xbox platform, and we don't know how PlayStation's is going to work.
Yeah, but I guess what Dom's saying is they're so consumer friendly that out of any company, they're probably the one who will do it for both no matter what, right? Even if it isn't like a set thing for PlayStation, they'll go out of their way to make sure you don't have to pay for it on PlayStation. They're a very unique case in all of this because I think no matter what, they'll make sure you don't pay on either, right? No matter the initiatives. That's just how they are.
And I think PlayStation, in one way or another, is going to have to kind of explain their upgrade system from PS4 to 5, if there is one.
Well, for
Or if,
those who
like I
don't
said, you're
remember,
just playing your PS4 Pro version on your PS5.
Yeah, for those who don't remember, the leap in last gen, a lot of times for third-party publishers like EA and Ubisoft, you were paying like 10 to $20 for the upgraded versions, right? I remember Madden, you would pay $10 to upgrade to the next gen version. So
Call of Duty.
exactly, yeah. But that
I think
wasn't
it's
everybody.
making me
Some of them were
wonder-
just like, sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
I was just gonna say it's making me wonder if we are gonna end up with a price hike to $70 instead of 60, because it's weird that Microsoft's so open about you're not gonna have to pay for an upgrade when there's still a possibility that the game would technically be $10 more expensive. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I think this says it will be 60, right? Because I mean,
It seems like that's what it would indicate, but maybe they're just that nice. I don't know.
because they're not going to sell a $70
consumer-friendly.
Xbox One game.
No. But I think he's talking about in general, like the cost of next gen games going up to 70, not
Right, but I
specifically
think this-
Xbox. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this says that they'll stay at 60 because
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to sell a $70 Xbox One game. You couldn't, you wouldn't do that. But if you were doing $60 on Xbox One and 70 on Xbox Series X, well then that goes against what you just said you were doing, of free upgrades, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next company to say something, this wasn't directly related to smart delivery like Cyberpunk 2077 developer CD Projekt Red was, but Square Enix came out and said, in regards to next-gen consoles, games it currently has in development will be available on current and next-gen consoles. It followed up by stating that games developed and released exclusively for next-gen will be, quote, somewhat farther down the road, unquote. This caught a lot of people by surprise because we've had the discussion specifically with Xbox of, okay, they announced that for the first couple of years there's not going to be next-gen exclusive games, and what does that mean for the attach rate for Xbox? What does that mean for its sales at launch? Like, if there's not a direct reason to buy the console and you can stick with your current Xbox, why should you buy it, right? And this is interesting because this is a third-party publisher saying, like, yeah, we're not planning on doing next-gen exclusive games for quite a while either. So it begs the question of, well, maybe this isn't just a platform decision by Xbox. Maybe because of the huge install bases on PS5 and Xbox One, maybe third-party publishers are like, yeah, what is the rush to do next-gen exclusive games when we just benefit from the install bases? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's one of those things. It's mostly good, but I don't know. I feel like it might prolong that, because normally every console generation has this, right? Where at the beginning it's like the new console doesn't really, games don't mostly take advantage of the new hardware for a little bit, right? And they're still making games for the old consoles, yada yada. This feels like it's going to prolong that that period quite a bit. So you're going to get a lot of texture and resolution frame rate upgrades, but you're not going to get like
Scope.
design decisions based on the new hardware for longer. Speculation, of course, but that seems to be where it's going.
This generation might be the one that is shackled by the previous one for the longest period of time.
Right.
And yeah, you might not get a game that feels, or get games in general, I should say, that feel like the scope of next gen because they're trying to still fit them on an Xbox One or PS4.
And that goes back to when we talked about it when they first said, when Microsoft first said, like, we're going to keep games on both, making games for both consoles for a while, which I don't think is that weird, but it made me go back to like, yeah, that's more accessible and more friendly, and allows more people to play games. But for the bleeding edge people who buy stuff right away and want the latest and greatest, you are going to end up like feeling like a PC gamer who's always irritable because the consoles are holding back how good games could be, right? But that's just the way it is, though. You got to go where the money is and where the user base is.
yeah.
Usually people who are making PC exclusives don't have the budget to make a crisis to where it's like, oh, this is pushing forward and we're not even worried about consoles.
Right, because there's so few PCs out there that can do that. It wouldn't be worth.
Also,
no
the joke
install
here
days.
is that the way Square Enix develops games, we won't really see the ramifications because by the time they do release their next game, it won't be for at least another 2 years.
I didn't
that's
even
It is
think of
weird
that.
how like we're still kind of playing games right now that feel old because they started being developed so long ago. We've had recent examples of that. I think within the last year, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a great example where it does not feel like a 2019
Fuck no.
built game.
Crackdown 3. Like there's
Yeah,
numerous,
exactly. We're still
Last
doing
Guardian.
that, and so 2025, we could be playing a game that's like meant for now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Phil Spencer ended his blog post by saying, "We can't wait to share more details about the new Xbox with you in the coming months." So probably E3. Some people are like, "Well, coming months maybe like they're doing an event beforehand." We don't know, but you can read into that as much or as little as you'd like. Lastly, something I wanted to mention. Remember at the beginning of this when I said that twice the teraflops doesn't mean twice the power. It actually means more than that, to keep that in mind. So one interesting note to all of this is that Windows Central posted a supposed leak last year that in retrospect was on the money exactly in terms of the specs for the Xbox Series X. So basically, lends validity to that entire post because they nailed everything, right?
The entire website has validity now.
Yeah. They also stated that Lockhart, the rumored cheaper SKU, which still hasn't been revealed, would be the cheapest entry point into next gen and sport around 4 teraflops of GPU power. There's that. Obviously, there's speculation. Is it focused on digital? Is it focused on streaming? Is it focused on Game Pass? Yada, yada, yada. But it gives us an indication of its relative power to the Xbox Series X. And if this is to be believed, the PS5. So in that same post, it was stated that the PS5 would have a 9.2 teraflop GPU, which is 3 less than the Series X. But remember that the PS4
3 flops, Sony.
Remember that the PS4 Pro was 4.2, so it's more than twice. But remember, twice doesn't equal twice the power, so it's even more than twice. 4.2 to 9.2. Though this number could have changed in the time since that, Sony could have made tweaks and focused on making it more powerful. The current rumors are around 10 teraflops, so still weaker than the Series X, but more than 9. It does create a conversation about what the gap in power and price may be for the two next-gen systems. A news story we didn't cover this week was that the PS5 will assumedly cost $450 to manufacture at base without including a lot of the other stuff that goes into manufacturing a piece of hardware. So people assume at the very least it has to be $470 to earn a profit. So that leads to people assuming that it'll probably be $500, right? Which is reasonable. We can all assume like $500 for the PS5 isn't surprising. We would like it to be $400, but we're not shocked that it would be $500. If it is 9.2 or 10 teraflops and the Xbox is 12, that leads to the question of, well, is the Xbox Series X a $600 console with the Lockhart being a way cheaper version to get in, right? So it'll have the top end and the bottom end of the market. Or is Xbox willing to eat money with their war chest, come in at 500 equally, and destroy in terms of power, right? Equally at the same value.
Yeah. I do think that it's going to be interesting if this generation the tables are turned, whereas PS4 started off more powerful than the OG Xbox One, so that could be a big, differentiating factor for what ends up, quote unquote, winning the generation.
The worst part is not only was the PS4 more powerful, it was cheaper because of the Kinect. The Kinect being packaged in made the Xbox $100 more expensive, so it was a weaker console and it was more expensive.
Man, can you imagine though? It obviously wouldn't be so literal, but the commercial is like Xbox Series X, 3 more flops than the competition for the same price. Obviously, that's not what the commercial's going to say.
Their official tagline right now is #Power Your Dreams is their official marketing term.
Power your dreams. Now, I will say, teraflops does kind of sound like a 90s video game marketing term.
Yeah.
I totally see that happening in like a 90s ad campaign where it's like, we got 3 more flops than the other guy.
It's a lot of interesting stuff. I will say, to Jordan's point, it is very similar to the Wired article, but for me personally, I liked it more because it was coming directly from Xbox and directly from the head of Xbox. If the Wired articles were instead posted on Sony's blog by Jim Ryan, I still wouldn't have been as favorable about him, but I think I would have ingested them a little bit better than it being on Wired of all places. On top of the fact, this blog post is coming after we've actually seen the console and multiple games for it on stage at the Game Awards, right? Whereas with PlayStation, we got 2 Wired articles and then that's pretty much it, and a logo, the PlayStation 5 logo, right?
Yeah.
So I think sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the Wired article is a story that they were telling, like a cover story for Wired, and this is much more direct and to the point of, here's what you're getting. Bullet points is almost what this sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. I just don't want it to seem like we're biased towards Xbox, because this is similar to the Wired article, but like you said, there's differences there that make it communicate to the consumer a lot differently, and the timing of when we already know what the Series X looks like. We've already seen Halo and Hellblade for the console, and what's Rare's next game? Everwild, I think. You guys remember that? It was like the frilly, like alien-like teaser they showed, I believe, at XO19.
I do not remember a title.
That's it for the news in terms of what we've been playing. I don't have a whole lot to talk about. There were some indie games I've played over the last 2 weeks. I'll mention them real quick. I replayed and completed Brothers: Tale of Two Sons. That's the indie game from Joseph Fares, his first game. I played on Xbox 360, beat it, got all the achievements. It's on Xbox Game Pass for Xbox One, so I downloaded it, played through it again. I love that game. Listeners out there, if you haven't played it, it's really cool. The whole mechanic of it is there's two brothers. You control each of them with a joystick, and you navigate them through this world, and there's puzzles and really fantastical story elements. It's a really emotional game, too. Hit you in your core if you're not too careful. It's the conclusion of the game is super sad. Next up, Death Squared. If you're a fan of Kind of Funny, they were sponsored, I think, to play this game a while back. It's a puzzle game where you control 1 to 4 little cube robot guys. It's an okay game. I just basically played it because I wanted to get some achievement score, if I'm being honest. But it's not too bad.
Welcome to Game Pass.
Exactly. It's not something I'd necessarily recommend to everybody, but if you are trying to rack up some, gamer score, or are looking for a fun little puzzle game that isn't too serious, it's a fun time. And the last one...
I've just been thinking about Game Pass players who are achievement hunters. It's like, wow. Talk about a fucking gold mine, dude.
Oh, there's a whole, there's video categories of the easiest gamer score in Game Pass right now, and play these games before they exit Game Pass. It's a whole thing, man.
Oh yeah,
a whole new world. I'm not that hardcore anymore, but I get the itch from time to time. Lastly, I played The Gardens Between, which is a really beautiful time-based puzzle game. You guys probably it was showcased at E3s and presentations for a number of years before it finally came out. It's one that takes place on a circular plane, so you walk around these islands, and as you walk forward and backward, time is manipulated.
I remember.
Really beautiful art style. Puzzles aren't too complicated. Some neat Easter eggs. Music is incredible, absolutely incredible. Very seldom do I finish a game and automatically go to Spotify and look up the soundtrack. For this game I did. It's definitely Life is Strange soundtrack vibes, except a little less hipster and a little more instrumental. But yeah, fantastic.
Jared, and this isn't just for games, it could be for, movies, comics, whatever, but just because something isn't all around amazing, an all around amazing movie or an all around amazing game, it could still have an incredible soundtrack or beautiful cinematography or this really cool character or even just a really cool moment. And so when, especially now where we're at with culture, I think it's such a part of entertainment to just label it as trash or garbage. People use those words a lot where they're like, oh yeah, it's just totally dismiss it, and I think that everything in entertainment was worked hard. Somebody worked really hard on it in some fashion or another, and I think that in a lot of ways there's something cool or something good or something that you can find interest in just about everything. So there's value there,
Well, funny you say that. One of my biggest pet peeves on this planet is when people say something is trash because they just don't like it. So they're not trying to be make obviously it's a subjective statement, but they're not trying to be objective in their reasoning of saying like, no, this person doesn't have talent or this just isn't good. It's just, oh, I don't like that thing, therefore it's trash. Like that's one of my biggest pet peeves is even when I don't like something, I can tell when something is good, it's just not for me, right? So I'll give you an example real quick.
Yeah, it's what you're saying. It's like the utter dismissal of something that, like I said, somebody clearly worked hard on, you know?
Yeah. So this happens a lot in music, right? So for instance, I like Billie Eilish's music, right? Personally, I really like Billie Eilish's music. I have friends who don't like her music, and they're like, "Oh, I hate the whisper singing." Totally cool. That's a fine statement. You can be like, "I don't like that type of singing." Totally get it. But there's people who'll be like, "Oh, they're trash. They're not talented." And to me, I'm like, how can you listen to at least a minute of her music and not tell that she's vocally talented? Like,
or at least creative.
Exactly. Like, just to be completely dismissive, it's like, oh, that person's trash of anything. I'm like, I just don't get that. And to me, honestly, most of the time, I find that the people who don't create things in their spare time are the ones that are so quick to judge, because I do think they lose out on the connection of how hard it is to create things, so they don't understand the work that goes into it. So there's not, you know what I mean?
Just in general, I think people don't appreciate the enormous energy it takes to build something that is creative, you know, to create something. Think about that. Being creative is whipping things up from scratch that did not exist before, and you are bringing them into existence. That is not as easy as people will, you know, dismissively say, basically.
Man, so apparently, this is going to get weird real quick, but apparently there are YouTube channels that are entirely not ASMR, but similar, but it's actually people farting in different acoustic settings.
What
That's
the
funny.
fuck?
That's funny.
And
that did get weird.
Yeah, and it's just to get different sounds out of it, and people like to listen to that.
That is
some amount.
That is like the fucked up edge of ASMR.
Yeah, that's like
right.
Yeah.
So like, after learning about that, it kind of brings you into that perspective of like, man, there is very little in the world that's, in terms of art, that's purely objective in what's good or bad, right? Because some people listen to farts and they like it. So like when you say like that movie was ass, right?
Yeah.
Someone's into it.
Don't yuck other people's
What's
yum,
it called?
you know?
Can I get it on Netflix?
Yeah, so that's our conversation. It's just frustrating when people are so dismissive, and it's like, I get not liking something, but to try to say objectively something's bad because you don't like it is like just an uninformed perspective. Anyway,
I usually say like, I don't get it. I didn't get that. I don't know what's going on. Like,
my go-to is like, it's just not for me, because that's usually what it is. It's like, it's not for me. I'll say if I think something's bad, but that's very rare, you know. Like Antonio Brown's rapping, awful. If you go and listen, he's recently tried to release music. It is objectively awful. Yeah. Anyways, so I played pretty much 3 puzzle games the last couple of weeks. I've been meaning to dive into some other stuff. I recently downloaded Yakuza 0, which just hit Game Pass. Been wanting to check out that series. Going back to our conversation we just had, I don't know if it's going to be for me, but I've heard the Easy Allies guys praise it so much that I'm willing to give it a shot. And 2 Point Hospital recently came out, which is like a city building game, but you're building up a hospital. So that looked fun. So I'm going to check out that too. And man, if we had quick resume for multiple titles, I could just hop back and forth between the two. But can't do that yet.
Where you at, Series X?
Yep. That's pretty much it for me. Nothing notable in terms of TV and movies. I started watching The Outsider on Amazon, which I like quite a bit. It's gotten not as interesting as it's gone along. I think it was better during the first 2 to 3 episodes, and the longer it's been going.
Just to be clear, so people don't get confused, this is an HBO show.
HBO, sorry, yes. I'm watching it on Amazon through the HBO portal. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And this Sunday they will be airing the penultimate episode.
Yep.
At which point I will be starting the series.
Hell yeah. Interested to see what you think. At least we'll get your opinions. Obviously, we'll be talking and stuff outside of the podcast after the fact once you leave. But it'll be nice to hear your thoughts.
It's Stephen King, so I'm going to be interested in it. You know,
Yep.
You guys can rest assured.
That's pretty much it for me. Dom, outside of the fart ASMR, what else have you been doing?
So, I booted up an old game that the last couple times I talked about it, I kind of give it a lot of shit, but it's a great game that I did really enjoy. But compared to its the
Sonic
rest
Boom?
of its series, it's not as usually looked as highly upon. No, Fallout 4. Because I don't know, I just felt like playing Fallout 4, so
There you go.
I've been spending some time there. I want to go back and actually get the platinum because I never did.
Whoa.
So I figured I'm gonna do that.
Were you
gonna
feeling
do
that Bethesda
base
itch? 'Cause I've been
building
feeling that
and
recently.
make all the people smiley faces and all that.
I don't know. It's Fallout 4 and it's a nice game.
You got,
Got
but
my
I'm saying
dog.
for the platinum, you got to like build up your town and make fucking everybody happy in the
Oh.
town, and it's like
Yeah,
I've heard it's
that's
tedious
right.
platinum.
I think because you have to get multiple playthroughs, but because it's a
Oh.
Bethesda game and they let you save
Multiple
at different
saves,
points,
yeah.
it's not so bad.
Mm.
But you're right. That particular trophy of like making a settlement 100% happy is supposed to be kind of annoying to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be all right. I'll figure it out. By now, there's got to be an optimized way to do it. The game is like a half a decade old, so.
Here,
They might have.
I want to say something real quick, Dom.
Gone into the back end of how people get happy or whatever, you know.
To your point, I've been getting that Bethesda itch recently, right? But
Oh.
here's my hope. The day the Series X launches, I want to see some Digital Foundry videos for the upgrades we talked about on this podcast, because if they're substantial enough for Fallout New Vegas, I might go back and replay that bad boy. That
Oh,
might
yeah.
be the Bethesda game to go back to for me. It's one of those weird things. I'm also in like an Assassin's Creed mood, but I'm like, do I just wait for the Viking game that's going to be coming out this fall? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hold on to that. So,
Yeah.
sorry, Dom. Go ahead.
I would say, you know, before you like place your bets on what you're going to be doing this fall, video game wise, I would wait till E3 because we're going to get a lot of questions answered, even if Sony's not there. You know.
Exactly. I was just thinking of like, do I play an Assassin's Creed game now
Right. Right.
and scratch that itch? But I think I'll
Scratch
wait.
it.
I don't know.
You get that
Um,
Games Pass. You know, if they're on there, you could do that.
Man, I own the Ezio collection, so I've just been meaning to like dive back in. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, Dom. Bit of a tangent.
Only one other thing, but it's worth noting, is played a lot of Death Stranding.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, we had
Oh,
that
boy-o.
discussion.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's really addictive, and I've mentioned that like the first weapons you get in the game are grenades made out of your own shit, piss, and shower water. But while it's happening, you're like, yeah, of course. But then when you think about it, you're like, wait a minute. When you go to throw it at an enemy, you're like, wait a minute.
You?
Oh, wait, that's okay. I don't know. You just think about it. But it's really weird. I really at least appreciate that this is an entirely new kind of gameplay.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like a greater emphasis is placed on specific parts of the gameplay that they're using here as opposed to combat, right? Because this is just very much, it's just not a game with combat. And it really, I really appreciate that. It makes me question, like, why is this weird? Like, does every
Yeah.
game need to have combat? Or, you know what I mean?
Now, how are you enjoying the presentation of the story, Dom?
At first, it's a bit annoying that everything has to be explained. Like, you can't just, it's not rain that degrades things. Like that, it makes you, basically the rain makes you age faster, something,
Right.
so to speak, and it breaks down your gear and your cargo. But it's called timefall. Why can't we call it some, like, an adjective and then rain? Instead, you have to explain the phrase timefall to me. And that's one example. Everything in the game has to be explained because it's weird new terms that a lot of times aren't needed.
Exposition
that's
Over
heavy.
convoluted, kind of.
Yeah, and it makes sense, I guess, but it's like, it's a lot. And I guess that's Kojima and the way he writes things. I don't know. So that's like, okay. It's called a void out. Why can't we just call it an explosion? Like, there's things like that. It's like, you just explained the definition of an explosion. Why did you give this a new name? You know?
Overall, do you like this game more than you thought you were? Do you like it less than you
Oh,
thought
yeah.
you were?
No, it is fantastic. Much like the shit and piss grenades. The last time I played, I got to a point, complete a mission. Oh, you get an upgrade, a new way you can play. Well, normally in most games that's like, oh, a new stealth capability or a new takedown ability or whatever. But it's Death Stranding and you're carrying stuff. So an upgrade in Death Stranding is a new way to carry stuff. So the upgrade is you get these sleds that attach to you via string and they hover or whatever, so you can carry more stuff on your sleds than you could just carry on your back. And as it happened, I was like, oh yes, like this is fantastic, and now I can carry more shit in my sleds. And then when I shut the game off a few minutes after that, I just kept thinking about it. I got really excited and I was really happy that I got an upgrade to carry more boxes to the next place. And I was like, I feel a little dumb that that's what it was, but it was really enjoyable. It's a weird thing. I don't know.
You know what's funny,
Whatever
Dom?
floats your sled. You know what I'm saying?
To that point, I know that the hardest sell for me to try to get somebody to play Animal Crossing is Dom, because multiple times he's looked at the game and said like, I don't get it, right? Like I don't understand why people would be interested in this. Yeah. I think Dom's hardest sell for me would be Death Stranding, because to me it's the same thing of like, I have no interest in ever playing that type of game. I don't know how people enjoy it. It just doesn't look enjoyable to me. It's just funny to see like the polar ends of that, of like, I'd want Dom to play this game, you know, Animal Crossing, but he's never just going to want to. He's never going to be interested, even how hard of a sell I try to give him. It's just the same way for Death Stranding.
I got to see more of it.
Interested in the Kojima story mostly. Like, Kojima's story, as crazy as it might be, usually I enjoy them. And so hopefully, my hope is that the gameplay won't annoy me, you know, and I can have some enjoyment there as well.
Yeah, the story's pretty good. If you like, you know, if you're into post-apocalyptic stuff, sci-fi stuff, if you know what I mean, like it's really cool. It's not that crazy. It's not, you know, it's nothing. It's creative. It's just some of the dialogue, especially really early on when it's explaining everything to you, is like, okay, it's a lot. But the story itself, as it's gotten on, I'm like really interested in. The characters are really cool and stuff, but. I gotta see. I do want to like. I need to see more of Animal Crossing to get on this tangent, because I think that could be cool. It's like a visual thing. We can talk about it later, but yeah, I don't know. I want to see more of it. I gotta give it a fair shake. I've just been pushed like shoving it aside and not really looking at it ever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just can't wait for March 20th, because what's gonna happen is I'm dropping $120 to buy Animal Crossing and Doom. I'm gonna load up Animal Crossing, get everything set up. You know, play a couple of hours, get into the groove, hop into Doom, just go full in, and then I have Animal Crossing to check in on periodically throughout the rest of my life.
Throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah. I am interested in Death Stranding, though. It is one of those games that I could see myself picking up for $20. My biggest gripe with it is the gameplay to me, and then I have such a hard time with Kojima's naming conventions in terms of characters. Like Die Hard Man and all that stuff. It's just like cringe to me. I don't know. I don't know.
Die Hard Man, dude.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't get it, because
Mama or whatever that lady's name is.
Like when they introduce themselves, they acknowledge the corniness of their names and they like explain why, but it's still like, but why?
That makes it even worse. Perspective. I'd rather it be like a mystery, or you don't have to explain it to me. Explaining it to me makes it even worse. It's like, ugh.
I think there are examples of Kojima doing like cool names, though, you know, like Psycho Mantis or Solid Snake is a very cool name. But then he definitely does some goofy shit as well, and obviously he's known for kind of being up his own ass a little bit sometimes, so I think that might be part of what this is. I think Death Stranding has a lot of that from what I can tell about the game. So
I also have zero attachment to Metal Gear, right, as a franchise.
True.
Or Kojima, so there's that too. I don't have that connection, but enough about me. Anyways, Dom, is that everything you want to say about Death Stranding? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, and Norman Reedus is in the game, and you get to hear a lot of his grunting.
You gonna watch The Ride?
Yeah, Ride with Norman Reedus on AMC.
Yeah. No, definitely not. No,
Jordis, hit us with what you've been doing.
What I've been doing is, surprise, been reading a lot of comic books. And I finally finished Injustice Year 5.
Hell yeah, it's been a long project for you.
For the original Injustice for me. And I'll be moving on. So I read Injustice Year 1 through 5, and that leads up to the first game. Then watched the first game's cutscenes since I've already played through it before. And now I'll be jumping into Injustice 2, which will then lead me into playing Injustice 2. I'll be reading Injustice 2, the comic, sorry, and then leading into playing the game. So I'm really excited to see Tom Taylor back for the Injustice 2 comic, because I will say I liked volumes 4 and 5, or years 4 and 5, I should say, of Injustice 1, but for me, he was definitely sorely missed after he left the book following year 3. So excited to see him back on the book. But nonetheless, it was still a solid ending and solid lead into the game. I had forgotten that the whole first game of Injustice centers around like basically two versions of the Justice League, kind of coming into contact with each other. And so I was kind of wondering, like, how are they going to get this all corralled in and tie it into this game? But then I remembered, there's a whole other version of the Justice League. So if like somebody died, it's just this Earth's version of the Justice League, and they're going to have a second set, I guess you could say, in the game story. So nonetheless, it's still the Injustice 1 story, I think, is actually pretty damn solid, and certainly has some really cool moments and solid writing, dialogue moments, I would say. So yeah, shout out to Injustice 1. Not that I played it recently, but I have played it and I did enjoy it. It's one of the few fighting games that I've spent some time with and enjoyed. So I'll be playing Injustice 2 soon enough. But just in general, I want to say big shout out to Injustice Comics. I think that they are an essential read and one of the best video game to comic book adaptations. We get, some things vice versa every now and then, but usually like video game tie-in comic books are not great. So this was really interesting, really well done, and of course made me fall in love with the writing of Tom Taylor, who I've now enjoyed on Deceased, and just read issue number 3 of Suicide Squad last night, and that is really heating up. So shout out to Tom Taylor. Also recently finished his run on Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was recommended to me by Jared, so shout out there. And then moving on from there, I want to give a huge shout out to Monstrous. I've been reading Monstrous, which is just a really cool comic by Marjorie Liu, and it is a fantasy comic with a very dark edge and has totally its own style. It's got European, Asian, all kinds of influences mixed in there, and is something very special. So I want to give a huge shout out to that book. What else? I've been reading all kinds of stuff. Started Batman White Knight, which is kind of an Elseworlds flip-flop where Joker starts becoming the hero and Batman starts going down a darker, more villainous path, I guess you could say. So 2 issues into that. That's been pretty cool so far. There was one other book. I read through. I had read through Batman Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, but then I read through the sequel Dark Victory, and then the spin-off Catwoman When in Rome. And I've just got to give a huge shout out to all that stuff, because some of the best Batman work of all time. It is a huge influence, especially Long Halloween is a huge influence on the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. And yeah, I would say that just every Batman fan should read Batman Long Halloween. It's a quick read. It is fantastic. The art is maybe a bit of an acquired taste. It's maybe not the most mainstream style art, but it is really cool if you can get into it. So big shout out to that, kind of comic series, I guess you could say, for a little franchise there. And then something else that I just hopped into, Dom, you're gonna like this one. It is time, my friend, because they won't tell me when this shit's gonna end. So I just said fuck it, and I started episode 1 of Better Call Saul. because I'm about to go all the way back through Better Call Saul, then Breaking Bad, and then finally, for the first time, watch El Camino. And wow, I am excited for this ride because it's a special fucking franchise, man. People, there's revisionist history with Breaking Bad being the best show of all time. People are like, yeah, Breaking Bad's great, but I'm like, bullshit. We all know who the fucking king is, unless maybe Better Call Saul finishes even stronger. I think it's probably a little bit too slow of a show to be considered overall better than Breaking Bad. I feel like Breaking Bad is more gripping, but nonetheless, these are top fucking tier shows, and boy oh boy, am I excited for this ride, Jared. I know you just finished Breaking Bad as well, so you've got a little bit of skin in the game as well.
Well, now, because season 5 is airing right now. Episode 1 was great, by the way. But 6...
I'm just going to wait. Now that I'm going back, I'm going to just wait and go back through it once I finish 4.
Because 6 is now locked in, and it's going to be the last season.
So they did say it's the final.
Officially, yeah.
Yep.
Thank goodness.
Recent news.
Really, I am sitting pretty then, the way I'm
good timing.
doing this.
Yeah. But it might not be like another year or two before 6 actually airs.
True. They do like to take a gap every now and then with Better Call Saul, but nonetheless, I have just wanted to know what season was going to be the last for a while now, because I think it's about time for the series to finish up. You know, you don't want it to go too much longer than Breaking Bad itself, so it's like, and there's only so much time, you know,
right?
They
You're gonna
cover.
hit the butt, yeah.
But yeah, nonetheless,
it's good, man.
It is. Yeah, like I said, it's definitely a different show, and it is slower than Breaking Bad, if you can even believe that. But it's special TV, man. Vince Gilligan, maybe not in every show that he does for the rest of all time, but with this stuff, he's done something very special. And so I'd love to give a gigantic shout out to Breaking Bad and its extended universe. Hopefully El Camino turns out to my liking later on down this road, but nonetheless, awesome stuff. So I think that's about it. I want to give a shout out to where X-Men comics are at right now. X-Men Fantastic Four #2 just came out yesterday, and I'm enjoying myself. I think that we are at the point now where I feel like I can comfortably say the X-Men have been revived. You know, like they've had a really rough go of it these last few years, especially in the comics, and I just feel so great and comfortable with where they're at now. It's a really cool spot, so shout out to that as well.
Shout out to Jonathan Hickman.
And, yeah, Jonathan Hickman and all the Dawn of X creators. And you know what, Jared? I mentioned this recently, but I want to say this again. When it comes to art in comics and just comic book creators in general, but especially the artists, whether it's pencilers, the drawers, the inkers, the colorers, whoever, shout the fuck out to South America, because I swear to God, man, I keep looking up these names of these artists that are just blowing my mind, and I'm like, fucking Brazil, fucking Argentina, just all over South America. They are killing the game, when especially comic book art, but just comic book creation in general. So shout out.
Shout out. That's been it for episode 179 of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. Thank you guys for listening. If you can, please follow us on iTunes. Leave us a review. It definitely helps out in the algorithm there, letting more people know our podcast exists. If you head over to YouTube, search Controlled Interest, we'll pop right up. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you know when we upload new videos. Can't trust those YouTube sub boxes. Can't trust them.
No way.
On Twitter, you can follow us collectively at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interest abbreviated. Tweet out all the videos and all that stuff. Personally, you can follow me at Jared _. You can follow Jordan at Melomotus, and you can follow Dom at Dom's Oreos. We'll catch you guys next week with Jordan's finale as a main co-host for the podcast. So make sure to tune in.
It's a see you later, not a goodbye.
Exactly. Catch you guys then.